Do you ever sit there and want to just scream at the top of your lungs, enough already, because you're feeling the weight of the world coming in? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. We have an amazing guest with us, and she is going to talk about her moment of realizing enough is enough. My name is Clara Capano, and we are here for another episode of Women Winning Their Way, where we talk about how you, as a professional woman, can start to define and create success all on your terms. So, Lindsey, welcome to the stage. How
Thank you,
are you
Sarah.
today?
I'm so good. How are you today?
I'm doing excellent. Now, before we dive in, I just have to share because I love our story of how we met. You are another road warrior like I am, always being on the road. And it just so happened that we were sitting next to each other, well, nearly next to each other
Yeah.
on an airplane. And it wasn't until the very end of the road where we started talking and realized we're basically the same person.
But that's because we both were so tired from the week we had. We just needed to recharge for a minute, and then it was all over at that point, Clara.
Exactly. And we have become friends. You have been such a great supporter of mine in helping me with the launch of my book. And I just love hearing everything you're doing. But before we dive in and start talking about when enough is enough, why don't you go ahead and just briefly introduce yourself to our group?
Absolutely. I am Lindsey Wiegle, managing partner at Blue Water Advisory, which is a boutique consulting firm located in Sykesville, Maryland. I've been with Blue Water for 9 years this coming October, and it is leadership development, helping organizations help their people succeed and achieve what they want and find happiness and balance and better communication in their work lives is my passion. So I am thrilled to be here with you to talk about both my Enough Already journey and just what leadership looks like in general for ourselves and how we operate in those shoes.
I love it. And, I do want to unpack a lot of this because, leadership doesn't just mean from a big corporate perspective. We have to remember, and this is something that I talk about when I speak and when I teach, is the fact that even if we're a solopreneur, we're still a leadership team,
Right.
even if we're a team of one. But let's go to this idea of enough already, because, as a working mom, there are those moments where, quite frankly, we're just ready to pack it in. We're just like ready to, say, I've had it. I actually remember I must have been about 7 years old, and my mom came down. And remember, I'm the youngest of four. My mom came down and announced that she was going on strike because we had enough already. And she disappeared for
Yes.
about 2 days. And my dad kind of looked at all of us and is like, yeah, what are y'all going to do now? So, regardless of if you're a mom or not, I think we all have these moments. So, talk to us a little bit about, your moment of how you got to this point of having to pull yourself back and realizing that enough can be enough.
Right. I much like you, Clara, I'm an overachiever. I'm a type A personality. I'm a make it happen kind of lady. There is no project you can't give me. There is no problem I can't solve. I am going to make it happen. And it is the way that I'm wired. And that worked until it didn't. And I hit a point where I was fine. Everything was fine. I was great. The world was operating well. And one day I had a total nervous breakdown because I had been operating so far past capacity for so long. There was nothing left to give. There was no pulling myself up by the bootstraps anymore. There was no more one more thing I can tackle. There was no more, oh, don't worry about that. I'll take care of it because I know I can do it better. There was none of that was left in my tank. And in one day, it all came crashing down. And I cried on my bathroom floor for 2 entire days. So your mom was smarter than I was because she removed herself before she saw it coming and removed herself. I did not see it coming because I'm so good at managing it all and doing it all. And so I hit a point where there was just nothing left for me to do or to give. And so I spent 2 days just basically crying and realizing that I was living entirely out of balance, out of harmony, out of any reasonable way a person should be living their lives. I was doing too much for any one person to be able to do. And so I realized the scariest part was that I, unlike your mom, did not see it coming. I had no idea I was operating so far past capacity. I knew I was tired. I knew I was stressed out, but isn't every working mom tired and stressed out? I mean, isn't that just the way we think that we're supposed to live our lives? And so everyone else I knew was that tired. Everyone else I knew was that stressed out. And so I realized that if I was going to avoid that ever happening again, I had to do things differently because if I didn't see it coming this time, I likely wouldn't see it coming again next time. And
Right.
so I needed to look at what had caused me to get there and then figure out how to live differently so
Mm.
that I could ensure that I never got to that spot again. And
Yeah.
what was interesting is that as I sort of unwound the first step, because usually we just go into fix it mode. I'm not going to spend the
Well,
time
that's
fixing that.
exactly what I was gonna say is, especially as overachievers, and I've had that same moment too where I'm looking around and I'm like, this is what everybody is dealing with. It's just normal.
Mhm.
And before we start diving into again how you did things differently, what were some of the things that were going on? What are some signs that might be telling us enough is enough already? Because I'll be honest, not many of us are as smart as my mom, and she lets us know that all the time.
Right. So the reality for me was that I was never pausing or taking a temperature check. I just wasn't. I was just living my life. I had it all on my plate. I was working a very, very full time job at that time as a partner in a consulting firm. I was traveling on the road. I was being, the mom in the classroom. I was being the soccer mom. I was being the house cleaner. I was being the baker of the bread for everyone in my neighborhood, right? Like I was being all the things to everybody. And part of what I began to realize through this process is that what I was really doing was seeking a lot of external validation to tell me I was enough.
Interesting.
Looking for all of those positive pings, right? So if I do this thing, if I show up in the classroom, oh, you're such a good mom, right? And oh, like if people walk into your house and clean, like, oh, you have such a clean house. My favorite line was, I just don't know how you do it all. I don't know how you do it all. And there was such this like,
And
whoo,
you're like, "Ah, yeah,
wind in my
that's
sails,
me."
right? They see
Mhm,
me, they see how hard I'm working. And the problem was it was a
mhm.
cycle, is that one of two things would happen. When I got that positive ping, it reinforced that how hard I was working was doing the right things because I now people are seeing and they're noticing and I'm getting that positive external validation. Or when I didn't get that positive external validation, when people weren't saying we appreciate you or we see this, then I got resentful. Look at all I'm doing. Why can't you see how hard I'm working? Why can't you appreciate all that I'm doing for you? And so I was always living in a space where how I felt was dependent on what other people gave me or didn't give me. And
Mhm.
I really had to take a step back and say, where does that come from? Why am I call it the doing badge. I lived for the doing badge. Give me if I can put the doing badge on my, my sash at the end of the day, I know I'm doing the right things. And
Mhm.
that's where I was getting my sense of, you're doing the right job, you're doing the right things, you're doing a good job. All that validation was coming from those doing badges and from external validation. And through the course of my enough already journey, as I peeled back the layers, I thought, oh my gosh, I am doing all of this. All of this. I'm killing myself. So others tell me I'm enough, that I'm clean enough, that I am a good enough employee, that I'm a good enough mom, that I'm a good enough wife, that I'm a good enough housekeeper, that I'm a good enough friend, that I'm a good enough volunteer. When the problem is that externally, while that ping feels good and it fills that tank momentarily, it doesn't stay sustained in that tank.
Right.
The
Because
only way
internally, you didn't feel you were enough.
right,
Externally, everyone was telling you or you were, but you had to deal with that internal
right,
notion and really get connected with the fact that you didn't need to do all of these things and you still could be enough.
right. Is that I realized very quickly that you can never fill your enoughness tank externally. It only you can momentarily fill it, but there is a hole in the bottom. And every time you get it filled a little, you have to fill it again and again and again. And that the only way to stop that cycle was to do the work to realize that I was enough just as I was. Whether my house was clean or dirty, whether I was a great employee or one that was struggling, whether I was the best mom that's ever been, or whether I was doing the very best that I could, I was enough just for existing on the planet. I was
Yeah.
enough. Once
Okay.
I did the work to get there,
Mhm.
I would say that I probably don't look less busy than I did before. I probably do a
Mhm.
lot I'm wired to be a doer,
Sure.
but I do it from a place of wanting to do things. I do it from a place of it makes me feel good to deliver bread to my friends. I do it from a place of it feels good to be able to be present and connect with my kids. It feels good to know the work I'm putting into the world is adding value. It feels good to do those things. It's not me trying to fill something within myself.
Yeah. And I think that that's a really great point because, so many of us, are overachievers and there's nothing wrong with that. It's
Right.
just going back to, again, the why, because very similar to you, I have my hands in several different things and people don't understand that. And they think something's wrong and they try to make me feel like something's wrong. And it's no, I do these things because they bring me joy. I don't do my shows, I don't write, I don't do my trainings to please other people. I do them because that's where I come alive.
Right. Right.
And until I stop feeling that way, I'm going to keep doing these things. And I love to challenge myself. But what I want to talk about now, then, is now that you are here at this point, so many times we have that ugly cry, we down some ice cream, maybe some wine, or whatever is our
Right.
choice
Right.
of numbing the pain, and then we jump back into it. And as you wonderfully stated, is you knew this was not a time you could just jump back into it. So,
Mhm.
what were some of the steps that you took to make the change happen,
Mhm.
to start to understand that you didn't need to seek external validation? Because
Mhm.
that's a lot of work. That's not something that can just happen overnight.
Right, right. So it really began, I call it my Lindsay observation time period, where I just sat back and I watched. What was I doing? What was bringing me joy? What was bringing me frustration? What was I connected to? Where was I energized? Really just wanted to take a moment, sort of like when they talk about when a new leader steps into an organization, you don't want to come in and make a whole bunch of changes right away because you don't know what's going on. When you're a new leader, you want to walk in, you just want to observe what is going on in the organization, what are people's roles, what's taking place. And so I really just took a step back. I'm like, "Okay, I'm just going to observe my own life for a minute as a spectator and really say what is going on in this situation because I never took a moment to look at my life. I was too busy doing my life to really pay much attention to it. And so I took a step back and I just said, okay, what is going on in this world? And then I started to the biggest thing for me was I began to notice these tapes that played in my head all of the time. The well, a better mom would, or a better
Mhm.
employee would, or a cleaner, a woman with a cleaner house would. Every time, everything I did came with this underlying, you could do better. And a person who lives that way is better than what you're doing. And so I think oftentimes when we try to change those tapes of I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, we want to prove that we're good enough first and then then we'll believe the tape. And what I found was that I had to change the tape first and the belief came second, which sounds totally bizarre. But I had to stop that incessant tape from playing in my head that says you aren't enough. And instead I had to pull it out and say we're not playing that game anymore. You are enough. And so I had to change the tape first and the belief came second. I'll never forget the day I was standing in my living room or my bedroom, was getting ready for the day, and I was running out the door, trying to get, the kids all settled and trying to get myself out the door. And I looked at a pile of clothes that were at the foot of my bed, and I thought, I need to put those away when I get home from work today. Just a very simple, oh, make note of that to take care of. And it hit me that my whole entire life, what I would have seen when I looked at that pile of clothing was, well, you know, you really should have gotten up in the morning. You should have gotten up earlier, and a better housekeeper would have had those put away before you left for the day. The first thing that I would have done was judge myself for something that was in my space. And instead, I looked at a task that needed to be done without any judgment about what it meant about me whatsoever. They were simply clothes that needed to be put away. And the freedom of every item you look at, every task you do, not being attached to judgment of yourself was such a freeing moment. Think I certainly have never arrived. Everyone has to fight those tapes, but
Sure.
I don't think I had ever had a judgment-free thought like that ever in my
Mhm.
life.
Wow, that is huge. And I can even start seeing so many times where I have those tapes coming on. And again, sometimes you just have to let go of these small things
Mm.
and realize that having a load of laundry doesn't define you as a
Right.
hoarder, as a bad person, as a bad
Right.
mom. It's
Right.
just laundry.
It's just
Now,
laundry. It needs to be
one of
done.
the things I really want to talk about, because here on the show we talk about the idea that sometimes we have to break from tradition. Sometimes we have to forge forward and define what is going to work for
Mhm.
us. And
Mhm.
this is something that you and your husband have come together, because you have a very different dynamic in your
It
household as far as support comes in and helping to get it all done. So tell us a little bit about one of the things that you had to change as far as your dynamic on the home front.
Right. So when I first started in this career, both my husband and I were full time working parents. He was gone 12 hours a day. I was traveling a lot on the road, and our life was total chaos all of the time. Hence why the nervous breakdown of being the person who was trying to do it
Mhm.
all. And when the pandemic hit, my husband got furloughed. And we both were working parents during the pandemic for a bit, and then he worked in hospitality, so he eventually was furloughed, and he was home for about 2 weeks, and I thought, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing. This is the greatest experience of my life." Having right, being able to more fully, I mean, as a mom, your attention is always split and always divided between your 2 primary responsibilities, but to be able to have someone who I can have this 20 minutes and you can have that 20 minutes, where there wasn't this fighting over our careers and the kids all at the same time of navigating all those schedules, was amazing. And so we decided that we would try to see if he could be a stay-at-home dad. And we were fortunate enough to have sort of furlough money that we just tucked into a separate bank account to see, can we live off of one income? Um, and then by the time it came back to whether or not he was going to go back to work, we had fallen in love with having a stay-at-home parent. And we're fortunate in the type of work that I do that I could make enough to make those things work within our family. And so he's been a stay-at-home dad for 3 years, and it's pretty magical.
I love it. So now tell me, because what I really want to do is, this is something that is non-traditional. I
Mhm.
don't know why. It just is.
Right.
It's something you don't see, and it causes pause. As you
Mhm.
went through this, what kind of feedback, what kind of pushback, as you told people, did their mouths kind of drop? And how did you and your husband come together and say, this is what works for
Right.
us?
Right. I think it was the pandemic certainly made it for a different time, because
Mhm.
there were so many people that were sort of laid off, and dads that were being at home because because of their situation. So I think at first when it happened, people were okay with it because they would say, "Oh, well, it makes sense now during the pandemic, and then once the pandemic's over, like he'll go back to getting a job, right?" It's like, "No. No, I don't I think and my answer is always, you never know, right? I mean, I certainly don't want to say he could never go back to work. I mean, if he decides he would like to go back to work, we can make that decision as a family. But for right now, this is the right decision for us. And you're right. There were, I think, some looks in the beginning and some, well, what's he gonna do? No one asks a woman that. You're a stay-at-home mom, like, well, what
Oh,
do you do? Like, you're gonna be a stay-at-home mom. That's your whole job, right? So it's really interesting, I think, for people to wrap their heads around. And I think that I will say that I think that because of the time we were in, there was a little bit smoother of a transition where roles were being so upended to begin with. But I think it was towards the end of the pandemic when people are kind of like, okay, when's he going back to work? Like, he's not,
mhm.
because he's a stay-at-home dad. And that's his job now. Because being a stay-at-home parent is a full-time job. It is a very full-time job when you have young children. And so I think that people, about 3 years in, people have accepted that he is a stay-at-home dad now, but it took a very long time for people to stop asking, when's he going to go back to work? And they have. And it works really great in our world. We're very, very fortunate that we had this opportunity.
So let's talk about the fact that not everybody has that opportunity, because
Right.
one, they may need a dual income
Right.
household.
Mhm.
Two, they may be a single parent, and not
Right.
have the luxury of that.
Mhm.
What would be some advice that you would have to, someone that's out there that is feeling the weight of the world, whether they have kids or not,
Right.
what are some starting points for them to maybe start delegating off and again finding a little bit of that breathing room?
So for me, so we talked about my enough already journey and sort of how I had to find that foundation of who I was first. And so I found that, and it's very solidified, and it's always a work in progress, but it's there. But the second part of my journey has really been about, so in my enough already book, I have the quote in the beginning, which is a quote that I sort of used during a coaching session that for a client that has become my own personal mantra. And it is now is reshaped how I live my life. And it's really around the idea of the question I ask myself all the time is, am I creating the life I want, or am I managing the life I've got? And I think that I spent so much of my life simply managing the life I had instead of creating the life I wanted. And and I was really good at managing it, but it wasn't getting me to where I wanted to be. I felt like I was spinning my wheels all of the time because I was just stuck
Mhm.
in the doing. And
Right.
so, as part of my Am I Creating the Life I Want journey, I've implemented a once a month, I call it my first Friday, where I sit down and I have a list of questions that I ask myself every month. And I take stock of my professional life, of my personal life, and of my wellness life. I think that oftentimes wellness gets lumped into personal. And I think that that is totally unfair because our wellness is such a huge part of how we can show up personally and how we can show up professionally that I believe it deserves its own category. So I take stock in all three areas of my life. And what I began to realize is that there was a lot of things that weren't working in my life. I was making them work, but they were not things I wanted in my life, nor were they were things that should be priorities in my life. And over the course of the last year and a half of this First Friday planning, it's really helped me continue to refine what is working for me, what is not working for me, and what do I need to change in order to get to where I want my life to be. And so I think oftentimes we wait until we have these big enough already moments where we've had enough and we've had it and we have our breakdown or we have our meltdown or we call our best friend and we're crying and we can't take anymore. And then we decide we're going to upend everything and change how we're operating. And I've decided that I'm going to take much closer stock every month. And frankly, every day I do morning reflection and evening reflection. But I do a big reflection on what's my calendar look like for the next 3 to 6 months. What boundaries do I have that are working and that aren't working? What habits am I doing daily that are working for me and which ones aren't working for me anymore? And so I think the reality is that it's about not just saying this is what my life is and I'm going to manage it the best I can. It's really about saying what parts of my life do I want to be better? What parts of my life are already working and how do I get those parts that I want to be working better to where I need them to be?
Yeah. And I think that that is so powerful. And I love that quote of, again, are you creating the life you want or just managing it? Because that is a
Mhm.
very different way of looking at it. And, when I do my trainings, I have my clarity success module and I, break down, and two of the components are rest and reflection and then also tracking. And this is something that I encourage people to do too. And I love that you have blocked this off and even kind of celebrate it by calling it First Friday. Because the reality is the way that I set things up today may or may not be serving me next month, 6 months from now. And so it's constantly doing that and remembering part of creating success on our terms is understanding that there's going to be different chapters, different seasons where things may or may not work. I talk about this all the time with my schedule. My busy season is different than during my off season, so I can alter things and show up differently during those times. But unless you take time to reflect and really start asking, is this working, is this serving me? Just like when you talk about your husband staying home, there could come a time where that no longer works the way it does now. And you
Mhm.
know what, that is okay, because we have to be able to evolve. And I think you brought up the pandemic, and I think one of the greatest things that came out of that is this concept of we have to evolve.
Mhm.
And as professional women, we're constantly doing that. And we have to understand that sometimes it's we're evolving too quickly and we need to slow down the evolution.
Mhm.
uh, and really having that time, to reflect. And, you mentioned that you go through and you ask yourself, what's working, what isn't working, doing these things. If something isn't working, Do
Mhm.
you have some certain steps that you do to evaluate? Do you just stop doing it? Do you look at altering it? Like, what are some of the things you do if you notice something isn't working for you?
Usually, so I'm a big habit and routine person. I don't have a ton of willpower on my own, so I like to create habits and routines that take care of that for me. and
Mhm.
so, and so usually it's about what kind of habit or routine can I put into place to help around that. I will say that for a long time, I struggle with boundaries because I love to take care of everyone and everything, and you can't do all of that. And so I recognized that my boundaries, both professionally and personally, were not where they needed to be for me to succeed in either of those spaces. And so a habit I put into place or a routine that I put into place was that as part of my evening reflection, I looked back and said, okay, where did I cross over a boundary that I shouldn't have today? Or where do I need a better boundary than I currently have? What did I do more of than I should have? Where should I have said no? And so for me, it's about not about making big sweeping changes, but it's really about the reflection piece about what worked in today and what didn't work in today. And for me, another really big piece is my word of the year this year in 2023 was alignment. And my goal was really to live in alignment with my values as a person and having clarity around what those values are, and then being able to say to myself, okay, in what ways am I living in alignment with the kind of person I want to be and the kind of life I want to have? And in which ways am I living out of alignment with what that needs to be? And when I see places that I'm living out of alignment consistently, that's a big indicator to me that that's something that needs to change. And
Mhm.
I think one of the things that has been the biggest game changer for me in this space, and I wrote a blog about this early in the beginning of the year, and it's such a silly example, but it's been transformational for me and how I look at my life. So I have a girlfriend named Katie who I love and adore. And I don't know how I even know this about her, but she flosses her teeth every day. And I always think, oh my gosh, that's amazing. I can't believe you get to the end of your day and you have enough energy to floss your teeth. Like, how do I be that person like that flosses my teeth every day? And so, because by the time I floss my kids' teeth every day, but do I floss my own teeth every day? I do not. And so I
Mhm.
did not. And so when I decided that I wanted to really like live my life differently, that I wanted to live in more alignment with my values, the reality is I wanted to be a person who flossed my teeth every day. I want to be a person who takes good enough care of myself that when I go to the dentist and they say, do you floss? I say, yes, yes, I floss. And I want you to give me like the pat on the head, be like, good job. Right. And so one day I looked down at I bought all the bamboo sticks, right? Because I want to be environmentally conscious. But so I bought them, and they just sat there for a long period of time. And one day I thought, okay, Lindsay, what kind of person do you want to be? Do you want to be a person who flosses your teeth, or do you not? And if you don't want to be a person who flosses your teeth, then just let it go. Just throw them out and move on, and stop beating yourself up about it. And if you do want to be a person that flosses your teeth, then just floss your teeth. Just do it. And so for me, every time I'm in that space of what option do I choose, it always comes down to what kind of person do I want to be? I want to
Yeah.
live in alignment with my values and the kind of person I want to be. And that requires that I behave in that way. Because when I put it to myself in those terms, it's an active decision to live out of alignment as opposed to, "Oh, I don't really feel like it." And that phrase, in alignment, not alignment, and what kind of person do you want to be has really changed the way that I've shaped how I live every single day.
I love that. And it reminds me so much of James Clear and his book Atomic Habits,
Mhm.
because he talks about that and again, making it your identity. And, I do the same thing. I really think about, and a lot of the things on my vision board is going back to who is it I want to become. And when
Mhm.
I'm at those moments, during the middle of the day, you know, the person I want to become, would they just go and take a nap, or would they make a phone call first? Would they go
Right,
to the gym first and get more energy?
right,
So again, using that. Sometimes it's yes, go take a nap. And sometimes
right.
it's like, no, go get some fresh air and wake yourself up because you have more work to do. But I
Mm.
really think that's a great way to again bring it in and use it as your compass. I want to shift a little bit over now into this concept of being enough in leadership, because this is where you work, you do a lot with leadership. And I think that sometimes as leaders, we feel we have to hold ourselves to a higher standard. And on some level, that's true because we set the standards, and an organization is only going to be good as its weakest link. And as a leader, we can't be that weakest link. But that can cause, again, another domino effect of over pushing ourselves. So,
Mhm.
how do you coach your leaders, male or female, on these concepts of knowing when enough is enough?
So it all goes back to, for me, and the thing that I see leaders do not do is taking pause and seeing where you're at. When I tell leaders that I take 4 hours a month, the first Friday of every month from 9 to 12, I focus on myself and what is working professionally, personally, and from a wellness standpoint. And they're like, I could never take 4 hours.
Mhm.
4 hours out of an entire month, right? To
Mhm.
really focus on what is working. You get more from that 4 hours than any amount of work you could do during that 4 hours. It ups your game so much when you are willing to look at yourself and say what is working and what is not. And I realize not everyone has 4 hours in their world, but even if you take 1 hour to really look at it, I think the biggest piece of advice that I can give is to get yourself out of the doing and really to take a step back and look at it and say, am I doing the right things? Am I prioritized in the right places? And not just from a professional standpoint, because how you show up, how your wellness is, impacts how you show up professionally. What's going on in your personal life shows up in your professional life. I know we like to think we can separate them, and we're really, really great at it. But the reality is we can't. The reality is that there is always bleed over. And the better we are from a wellness standpoint and the better we are from a personal standpoint, the more energy we bring into our leadership.
Mhm.
And so for me, it's really all about helping people see the totality of all of those pieces together and taking the time to reflect. I think the biggest thing that I've heard people say back to me that has made the biggest impact is that to take one thing I tell all of my leaders, that when we're working on behavior change or we're trying to create a different habit or routine, or we're trying to be a better listener, or we're trying to delegate more, is at the end of every single day, take 2 minutes and write down one around that behavior change, one time you did that thing really well today, and one time that you either didn't do a great job or it was a missed opportunity to do a better job. I had a woman I was coaching one time named Gretel, and I love her so much. And she was working on some passive aggressive comments that maybe she like slipped out as she would get frustrated. And she said to me, she's like, here's the thing, Lindsay. She's like, I wanted to say that thing in the meeting. I wanted to say it so bad, but I didn't want to have to write it down at the end of the day. So I just kept it to
Yeah.
myself. Like, whatever it takes, Gretel, whatever it takes, man, right? If that's all that stopped you from saying it, that is an activity well worthwhile. And so for me, it's really about asking leaders to take a look at themselves, because most good leaders that I see don't want to delegate because they don't want to put more on their teammates' plates. They sometimes don't trust them to do the job as well as they could do it. And so they take on too much. They don't take a pause. They think working harder is going to get them where they want to be. When in reality, taking a break and looking at what you're doing, shedding the things that aren't working, creating better boundaries so that you have more time and energy around those specific things that are high value activities in your world that are meaningful and that matter, is what ultimately leads them to be more successful, to be happier in the work they do. I know we always talk about being more effective and more efficient, but I think enjoyable is the other piece of work that matters so much. Is that when we get it right, we are more effective, we are more efficient, and it is more enjoyable to do the things that we do.
Yeah, I think you're really spot on. And I want to, tailor this into, the next question, which is, how is this making you better? We started off by talking about that you always had this drive because you wanted that validation and you wanted to be the best. You wanted to be a great wife, a great friend, a great person at work, a great mom, all of these. But how has the lessons that you've learned and these practices that you've put into place? I think so many times we are afraid to put boundaries in place because we worry that's going to affect us negatively. We're going to lose business, especially on the professional side. So, how has learning how to be enough and do enough, how has this actually made you better,
Mm.
stronger, and actually more purposeful and productive?
So I think the biggest thing is that it's given me the confidence because I'm doing the work. I'm putting it in. I describe this a lot of times to the clients that I'm coaching, is that I think oftentimes we think of confidence as this armor that we put on. Like, okay, I'm gonna go be confident. And it's this rallying against that internal nagging of am I enough? And so I put that external armor on and gonna go tackle being confident. When you do the work and when you live in it every day, when you're checking yourself to say, what am I doing well? I'm sure I know you do these as well, but I do my affirmation every morning. I do my gratitude every morning. I do what are my priorities for the day? And here's what's really important. I don't do priorities as far as what do I want to get done from a task list standpoint. It's not I need to drop the laundry off, right? It's what I need to do is I need to be really focused during my training today. What I need to do is I really need to utilize those down minutes in between coaching sessions to knock out some things in between. I really need to be super present with my kids today because I have a long week at work and that's when my batteries get drained and sometimes I zone out a little bit. And so it's really about at a high level, what are my priorities as a human need to be today so that I can show up in all the spaces. So I can do all the to-do list items, but my priorities are never to-do lists. They're always about my attitude, my attention, and my overall view of the day. And by doing that and my reflection in the evening, it really helps me to have the confidence to say, I'm doing the right things. I'm paying attention in the right places. And it gives me this internal confidence that doesn't require the confidence armor that I used to have to walk around in to sort of put it on to tackle the day, but a natural sort of soft confidence that comes from that because it's an internal confidence that I walk around with. And I think it's made me a better mom. I think it's made me a better wife. I think in general, it's just made me a better human to know that I'm living in alignment with the kind of person that I want to be at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I love it too because when I look at these things again, my journey has made me better too. I feel not that I'm perfect by every mean, but one of the things that I've noticed for me is I like who I am.
Right.
Whereas before I would sit there and say, "Oh, I'm accomplishing a lot," but I
Right.
really didn't like who I was. Now I'm happy. That was something I struggled with for a long time. I was
Mhm.
very cynical. And I can honestly say that I am happier now than
Me
I've
too.
ever been. And it
Me too.
doesn't mean that I don't work. I work really hard. But you know what? I have a smile at the end of the day. And I think it goes back to, again, are you living in alignment? Going
Right.
back to that question of, again, are you being and are you acting in alignment with the person you want to become? And I
Mhm.
think that that's a big part of it, and that's one of the things that I know you do this in your work and I do this in my work too, is helping people again create that vision first. What does it mean? We talk about living a life of alignment, living a life of harmony. Well, what does that even look like to you? Because the way that it could look to me could be very different than how it looks for you.
Mhm.
And we can't hold ourselves to those judgments or those standards. We have to do what works best for us.
Right.
Now, I have a couple more questions for you. One of the questions is I know that you again are doing so many things, and in the show notes there's going to be links for people to connect with you, also to get your book. But talk to us about some of the other things that you are working on. What's next for Lindsey?
So we spend a lot of time right now talking about how to help leaders. So we have lots of senior leaders that are getting ready to retire, and we have lots of leaders who need to step into those spaces. We're having more retirements. There's 10,000 people a day turn 65. And that's a lot of people to turn 65 every single day. And so there is a push to help. There's also been historically a big gap between sort of senior leaders' willingness to mentor and grow junior leaders in the ways that they need to be. And so we spend a lot of time right now helping those junior leaders move into those senior roles and be ready to move into those spaces. And it's really fun because it does, in the way I believe leadership has to take place, it has to be from all of those different aspects. It has to be, how are you operating professionally? Are you taking care of yourself personally? Are you taking care of your wellness? And so really helping leaders shift the mindset from work harder. And I don't want to say work smarter because that's such a cliche, but it work in a way that works for you, right? Get to where you want to get to, but in a way that works for you. And so we spend a lot of time helping leaders get prepared for that. So it's such an exciting time for us because there's such a need for that transition, for all these opportunities for leaders to have in the future, and so many people to be able to help those leaders in the future. And so for us, it's really all about how do we prepare that next generation of leaders to continue to help businesses to be successful and to do it in a way that works for their lives.
Yeah. And I think that that's really important because I would imagine that for a long time, The thought was, is I don't want to grow someone to replace me because then they're going to kick me out of the door. And we have to remember that that's not what it's about. It's again, when we grow, when we share, we have to think about the organization and again, the transition, because you said it earlier, you never know what's going to happen. And, we always want to be able to make sure that we're cultivating the people behind us. We're always cultivating that culture because when your team knows that you're growing the replacement, there's a certain level of, I would imagine, confidence and security it brings them
Right.
to know that there's that long-term vision because
Right.
people want to be a part of that long-term vision.
Well, and part of it too is I think that oftentimes people are working at a job below their job because they're trying to help people. They're not delegating as much as they need to. They're not taking care. So they're spending a lot of time in spaces sort of below where they need to be. And when you are able to raise and mentor the people below you, it allows you to elevate the kind of work that you do. You get to spend your time in the strategy and the kinds of things, maybe more relationship development or business development that you have exponentially more value in than the doing down here. And so when a rising tide lifts all boats, right? And so when we can raise
Yeah.
those leaders, it raises the senior leaders even more to be able to do what they are best at and where they can bring their best value at this point in time. So it's so fun right now. It is so fun. I have the best job in the world. I get to help people love the work that they do, and I get to help people create lives that they want. I mean, do jobs get better than that? I don't think they do. I don't think.
Seriously, I mean, exactly. I love that so much. I have a kind of a third secret question I want to bring in that you
Okay.
just put on the word, this concept of delegating, and not to put you on the spot, but to put you on the spot. What
Okay.
are some things that you personally delegate?
Oh, what are things I delegate? Not as much as I should, Clara, but I will say,
Me too. That's why I want to ask you.
so I am getting better about this. Is honestly where my boundary activity has been really helpful to say,
Mhm.
should you be doing that thing? No, you probably should not. So I have learned to delegate a housekeeper, even though my husband is a stay-at-home dad. Having a housekeeper who can deep clean your house all in one day is game changing. It is a non-negotiable in our world at this point in time. I will say that. So my husband does do a lot of improv comedy. He has a very successful improv comedy career, if you will. And so there's lots of times where he's got a show and I've got a training that runs late, or I'm out of town. And so we've really had to lean on our community to say, can you pick the kids up to go do this? Or can you take them to soccer practice here? And so it's really about asking for help in the spaces that I need. So more than having a set number of things I delegate, it's really about being willing to ask for the help to say, yeah, you probably could kill yourself to go do that, but maybe you just say, could you pick up Maggie for soccer tonight, and let that be enough. And so for me, it's been about a willingness to ask for help when I realize I need it has been my biggest opportunity to delegate, if you will.
Perfect. I love that. Yeah, that was a lesson I struggled with for so long, especially since I was a single mom in shared custody. I felt so guilty because I'm like,
Right.
I only have my son 50% of the time.
Mhm.
How dare I even bring in somebody to help during those times?
Right.
And I started with a buddy system where it would be
Mhm.
again, hey, why don't you drop the kids off and I'll pick the kids
Oh,
up
I
and
love
those
that.
kinds of things. So,
Mhm.
that's a great way to bring it in.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
before I get into our last question, I just wanted to just say thank you and acknowledge you. Meeting you on the plane that day was such a tremendous gift. Not only because I made a friend, but I met somebody else who has the same zest and passion for delivering impact to others, for
Mhm.
understanding that we don't need to give more. It's about the quality of what we give. And that when we are comfortable with who we are, again, we are enough. And I
Right.
just want to say that you are a beautiful soul. It has been a true gift to be able to know you, to have you. I love the work that you're doing, and I know that there is even more. So, thank you so much for taking time to come on today and to share some of your wisdom and unlocking all of us to know that regardless of where we are, what we have going on, we truly are enough.
Well, I appreciate that, Clara. I could say every sentence you said to me, I could say back to you. It has been such a gift. Every time I see you on social media, I think, oh, she's out there killing it. I am so happy for her. I just am so thrilled for all of the wonderful things that you do and all the gifts that you of your gifts that you give to the world. So I appreciate our friendship as much as you do. So
Thank you. So the last question we have is we're talking all about creating
Yes.
success and more importantly, defining success on our terms. So where you are today,
Mhm.
learning everything that you've learned, how do you define success for yourself today?
That is a really great question. There is when I was thinking about what success looks like, there's certainly long-term vision of what success looks like. There's the, how much do I have in my 401k? And there's all those sort of tactical pieces of success, certainly that exist within my world. But there's a woman, when I wrote Enough Already, I went through a program called Nonfiction Book School with Stacey Ennis, and she had posted something about 6 months ago that just lives in the core of my soul. And it was something to the effect of, most people think success looks like having $100,000 car. I think success is taking a midday nap. And I thought,
I'm
right,
there with
right, being able to create a life where you think, you know what, I really need a nap today, and I'm going to take a nap in the middle of my day, and my business is going to continue to run, and my family will continue to operate, and the world will continue to go on around me, and I can take a nap for half an hour. It means that all of my ducks are in a row. It means I'm doing all the right things outside of that time and space, that the flywheel has turned enough that when I need a nap, I can take a nap. And to me, that is because what it means is all of those other pieces are right. It means I'm spending enough time with my kids. It means I'm spending lots of time with my husband. And in this moment, what I really need is a nap, and I'm going to take a nap. And so I think that for me, being a really good mom is incredibly important to me. Setting a good example for my kids, putting good humans in the world is about as important as anything else could be to me. I think the world needs lots of really good people in it right now, and so that is probably the pinnacle of what success looks like is having raising children that are good people in the world. But after that, it's being able to take a midday nap for sure.
you. I love my midday nap too. That 45 minutes is sort of my sweet spot. So
Right, right.
oh, well, we have just covered so much today. And again, Lindsay, thank you so much for being here. We are going to put all of your information in the show notes. So if people want to reach out to you to find out more about your book, to talk with you, or even hopefully hire you in your company to come in
Absolutely.
and do some leadership consulting, we want to be able to do that. So for all of you out there watching, thank you for being here. Again, this is Women Winning Their Way, where we talk all about the power in creating success all on your terms so that you can do more, make more, and also live more. I'm your host, Clara Capano, and we'll see you next time. Oh, what a powerful, powerful conversation. And I just want to take a few moments and sort of decompress on some of those things and share some tips and give you your moment of clarity here, where we're talking about these. I think some of the things we talked about with Enough Already is, bordering on that term we use so much, burnout. And I love to really start to think about how can we do burnout intervention? How can we get out in front of it? And Lindsay did a great job of this in the beginning of our conversation, where she talked about being more aware. Let's start to pay attention and start to see the signs, because the more that we can lean into it on the front end, we can intervene and not let it get to that point where we're having that point of burnout. So just some notes that I've taken and some thoughts that I want to give you to help you on your own path to knowing that you are enough, knowing that you're doing enough, and to be able to help you fight from getting that burnout is, and these are in no particular order, but coming back to that main question, who is it you want to become? A big part of living in alignment, a big part of keeping yourself from getting in burnout is by getting clear on your vision. Who is it you want to become? What are the values that drive you? And using those and putting those together. One of the things that I've done is I have identified 5 words. And these are the words that I know represent me when I show up as the best version of myself. And for me, those 5 words are energized, prepared, passionate, motivating, and genuine. So, what I love to do is I check in with those words every morning. Clara, are you ready to be this person today? Because if I show up as the best version of myself, I'm going to be able to give with the right amount of energy, the right purpose, and again, deliver the value. So get clear. And then throughout the day, check in. Throughout the week, throughout the quarter, check in. Always ask yourself, Are you living in accordance with the standards that you have set for yourself to make sure you're showing up as the best version of who it is you want to be? Another thing, starting with gratitude. Lindsay talked about this, and I do this as well. When we start our days with gratitude, and it's simple, you can do it before you even get out of bed in the morning. You don't have to write it down if you don't want to, but identifying what are three things that you are grateful for. The truth is when you start your day with a grateful mind and a grateful heart, it starts to permeate. There is a great TED talk by a gentleman named Sean Achor, who wrote a book called The Happiness Advantage. And what he found in his science, in studying the level of happiness and how it correlates to success, is that when you focus on creating a line and a foundation of happiness, is you actually can perform 37% better, more efficiently, more productively. So it's about creating that ripple effect. And it's really hard to have a bad day when you start your days with gratitude. Understanding this idea of, again, delegating. It's not a matter of I cannot do something. Let's be honest. We all can do anything we put our mind to. It's a matter of should you be doing this? Remember, you are the CEO of your business and your life. And it's not a matter of can you do stuff. You've got to go back to what is your role in your organization? Are you doing the right things? Start small. Just like Lindsay, I started with a house cleaner and I started working on those. Delegate to your kids, to your family, ask friends for help, hire a virtual assistant. But you've got to find those things that really do not require you to be giving your full attention to it. You've got to find the core fundamentals that you need to focus on. Oftentimes, these are called our vital few areas, and we want to do less things at a higher level. Because when you can free up your time by delegating off, even if it's 15 minutes, you then can reinvest that 15 minutes back into the other areas of your life. Yes, it could be in business, but it also could be in yourself. So you can take that nap or go for the walk, or again, just have a quality conversation with somebody that you love. Set deadlines. Time expands to the amount of time we give it. Going back to the concept of how productive are you the day before you go on vacation? It's amazing everything you can get done because you have a deadline. So don't just run your days by saying, I need to get this done today, because technically that takes you up to 11:59. Say, I need to get this done before noon. Have a start time to your day and an end time to your day. I know that when I worked a traditional job, rather being a solopreneur, my day ended at 5 p.m. That's when the office closed. So I started wrapping up my day at about 4:30. Why can't you have an end day if you're a solopreneur? You still can. Determine what that is and really work by doing these things. And again, get support. Ask for help. This is something I waited far too long to do. And this was another reason why I was living on that hamster wheel. Again, it's not just the delegating, it's raising your hand and saying, hey, can you help me with this? It could be, oh, you mentioned you're going to the grocery store. Do you mind picking this up for me? It could be ordering your groceries online. I've gotten great at doing that. And yes, it's an extra $15, but you know what? That's an hour of my time that I get back to myself. So there's all these things that you can do to be able to, again, ask for help because people want to help you. And then return those favors. When you're going to the grocery store, you're going and running errands, ask others. If you have a week that is a little bit more open, ask them, hey, I have a little bit more free time this week. Is there something I can do for you? But when you live in this level of intentionality, this is how we start to get clear on everything we're doing. This is how we start to bring the harmony back to our lives. So thank you for following us today. I hope you took away a lot of tips. Don't forget to keep following me. And again, if there's something that I can do to help you take your business, to take your life to the next level, please make sure that you are following me. Make sure that you're taking time to like, comment, subscribe, and also share these shows so that we can continue to have that level of impact. And if you're ever looking to, bring somebody in to speak to your team, or again, if you just want some individual work to help you personally, go ahead and go to my website, justclaracapano.com, and we can talk about how we can help you get connected with your own personal clarity. So until next time, have a great day.